morning. What's going on, y'all? I want to apologize first about the weird camera angle. I honestly have no clue how to set up my camera in my vehicle. I just have a regular handheld camcorder, so I guess I could hook up the GoPro, but it doesn't have anywhere near as good as audio quality. But anyway, I just want to do a video real quick. One of the groups on Facebook that myself and a few others we run for a keto group, I get a lot of times people get kind of some mixed information when it comes to insulin levels, how insulin affects us, how it works with us, how it affects keto. So I kind of want to just make a quick video addressing some of the information on that. So guys, just remember that insulin is not bad. Insulin is never going to go away. It's just a part of who we are. It's how we manage it and how we manage the spikes that is going to be more important. Insulin itself is just a chemical that's going to transport glucose into our cells, primarily our muscle cells. It uses, I believe, 4 proteins or so in order to kind of build that bridge that helps it get across the cell barrier. So again, it's not necessarily a bad thing. Insulin does store as fat in most cases. Luckily on a ketogenic diet, there's a lot more benefits to the way that we eat that help us with our insulin levels. We'll kind of go into that. And I'm going to provide 5 tips on how you can kind of keep your insulin levels in check. Insulin is typically going to be released when we intake certain amino acids, so like leucine, arginine, and then of course as well as your sugars. A lot of that's usually going to come from, for most people on a standard diet, is going to come from carbohydrates. So I always think to myself, the old adage that, oh, you eat Chinese food and then you'll be hungry again in another hour. Most people are like, oh, it's the MSG, that's why it's the MSG. I mean, the MSG kind of played a little bit of a role in it, but now, especially with health regulations, the MSG is highly monitored. Sorry, y'all, I'm trying to not have this weird ass angle. A lot of it also has to do with the fact that Chinese food, for example, is typically very carb rich because you've got your proteins are covered in sugary sauces half the time. And then you've got, your rice, your noodles, your this, that, and the other. You've got all these other carbs sources. So what's happening when we're having these carb sources, we're going to be creating a couple different spikes. We're creating spikes both in our blood glucose and our insulin levels. Now, they don't necessarily fall back to normality at the same rate. So this is going to create a little bit of a gap where your blood glucose and your insulin levels are trying to get back to their normal levels. It's typically within this gap is when we start actually feeling hungry again or wanting more carby, starchy foods. It's that waiting to get back to normality that even though we might have just had a huge meal, a Chinese buffet, stack of pancakes, whatever, when we're trying to return back to normality, that's when we typically are going to get those feelings of hunger again. So y'all, I want to go over 6 tips that'll kind of help keep your levels in check. So one of the first ones, and this is kind of the ones I was discussing in my Facebook group earlier, is a lot of people say, well, I want to try to get most of my fats in, or I want to get most of my calories in for breakfast. I want to get everything in for, try to get as much as possible for my first meal. That way I know that I have energy for the rest of the day, and then I can make my meals smaller, and then I don't feel like I'm getting too heavy, and this, that, and the other. It's not a bad idea to make breakfast one of your bigger meals, but you still need to keep your calories in check for that meal, especially if you're doing intermittent fasting. So for example, if you're having one meal at one sitting and it's 1,000 calories for one meal or close to it, the more calories we take in, the higher chance we have of spiking our insulin. On average, I usually see people's meals at about 300 to 500 calories. That's including anything you're drinking. So if you're doing a bulletproof coffee for breakfast plus food, you want to try to usually keep it probably at about 500 or a little less than that, so that you have less of a chance of spiking your insulin. Keep in mind, any time that we intake food, especially when it's going to be protein, aminos, if you're not doing a keto diet, if you're taking in any kind of sugars, we're going to have a higher chance of spiking our insulin. Again, not that necessarily on a standard diet insulin spikes are god awful, but they can affect us over time. They can store fat. They can make us feel sluggish when we finally hit that crash. So we just want to make sure we're keeping that in check. You saw my my Monster that I had earlier here. Now I will tell you that I usually pick one or the other for my caffeine source depending on how I'm feeling for the day, where I may do coffee, I may do a Monster. I have a very high tolerance for caffeine, and a lot of that is just from my upbringing and just stuff that I was exposed to. But high amounts of caffeine can actually start to affect your insulin levels. High amounts of caffeine can spike your insulin levels. So if you notice, if you're doing a keto diet, for example, and you are having issues either staying in ketosis, or you're feeling sluggish and you're not quite sure what's going on, if you're pounding, 4 or 5 bulletproof coffees a day, or if you're pounding a couple things of coffee and some energy drinks, caffeine pills, pre-workout, whatever, tone it down a little bit. Get a pre-workout that doesn't have any stimulants in it. If you're doing a pre-workout, and just again keep the caffeine intake in check. Now this one, I know it sounds like a given, but it is true, and that's to exercise regularly. Exercising regularly is using our stores in our body, and it keeps our insulin in check. There are some times that during resistance training that you might get a small spike in the beginning, but once your body reaches kind of a normality, or it starts getting a little bit more used to, oh hey, I'm doing stuff now, you're going to see that it actually improves your insulin levels. I would always recommend, especially if the goal is weight loss, you need to do some resistance training, some kind of weight training. You can do it in addition to cardio. As long as your cardio, I would say to do kind of intense interval cardio. I hear a lot of mixed information where people try saying that, well, you can't, if you're doing keto, then you can't lift heavy. I'm sorry, there's Jason Whitrock, Logan, Goody Beats, myself, there's a ton of people that lift heavy while on keto. It will not screw anything up. If you are just nervous about getting big and bulky, remind yourself that there are professional bodybuilders who bust their ass every single day, eat super strict diets, work out 6+ hours a day just to try to get to the size that they're at. If you're working out normal and you're only working out an hour a day, weights are not going to make you big and bulky, whether you're a man or a woman. That's an insult to all those people that have to bust their ass to get as big as they try to get, if they're natural. Another thing is getting your essential vitamins, like your omega-3s, ALA, vitamin D. All those things are going to be helpful in keeping our insulin levels in check. And then lastly, another thing that I'm sure you've heard countless times, especially if you're trying to do weight loss, and that is get enough sleep. I know it sounds silly, I know people are tired of hearing it, but it's 100% true. We need to have, especially when you're doing keto, you need to have adequate sleep. This is your time for your body to rest, for it to recover, for it to process everything that you're doing throughout the day. I would honestly say do not get any less than 6 hours of sleep. Now, you're talking to somebody who is very busy every single day, mostly every single day. I understand the struggles, especially like if you're, a parent, if you're a caretaker of some sort, if you have multiple jobs. It's not always going to be easy to get that adequate sleep, but we have to make it a priority. Tell yourself no less than 6 hours of sleep per day. Y'all, I apologize again about the weird angle. I appreciate you watching this video. Hopefully I gave you some important information. If this video was informative for you, please give it a thumbs up. That helps me out immensely. And guys, I do have a keto protein giveaway coming up soon. You must be subscribed in order to be entered. So if you're not subscribed, subscribe now, because I'm going to be doing this contest. I'm thinking I'm going to be doing it actually before Thanksgiving. So guys, again, initiate, dedicate, decimate.